All right, welcome to our Mochi Podcast, the only podcast rated R for Robin. Today, my guest is Parag Mital. Let me get your audio going. Perfect. Parag is the CTO and head of research for Hypersurface. He's also the founder of The Garden and the Mahcine Inc. You're here as of batch 3. Welcome. Thank you for being my guest.
Wow, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I was doing research into figuring out what you do, because you do a lot of shit.
Yeah, I don't even know what I do.
Yeah, so you said in our initial talk, you talked about doing a lot of computational art,
That's right.
and that's your what your PhD is in, right? So do you go by Dr. Mittal or?
Yeah. No. I mean, I guess technically I could, but I suppose like the suffix PhD is more appropriate if I were to use it, but just Parag, really, it's fine.
No, I mean, if I had the opportunity to use more titles, I absolutely would. And I definitely throw it around at parties. The name is Tumlos. Dr. Tumlos.
I'm Professor Doctor.
Yeah.
No, it's just.
So how did you get into doing computational art? So your bachelor's is in computer science, and you did a master's in artificial intelligence.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. It was a long journey. Like, there were some key points, I would say. Kind of like my mentor through undergrad, Dr. Polakis, amazing woman. She kind of just sent me on this journey. I was like, I'm interested in computers and I'm interested in music, but I don't really like, developing computer vision software for the military. So what do I do? And I remember this moment. She just went to Google and typed in computer music. I was like, oh, there's a computer music conference. And she's like, I'm going to send you there. And that was kind of the entry point, really, for a computational arts practice.
This is different from just techno or MIDI, using a computer to put in musical notes. It's generating music using algorithms and shit that you're essentially Frankensteining into new music.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's everything. That space is very wide, but it was definitely that aspect of things that opened my eyes. Yeah.
So are you geared more towards visual or audio art?
Both. Yeah, I would say they're both very much a part of my practice. It's more like experience and perception that I'm interested in. And those are the two kind of modalities that I focus on.
So at Hypersurface, you're the CTO, but from my understanding, what they do, it's what you're working on there is making smart interactable surfaces that are there are algorithms that are patented and made for different surfaces, and you program it all onto microchips or Arduinos. I don't really know what they are.
Yeah, microcontrollers. Yeah.
And then you can just you can have a smart chair or a smart microphone or a smart your forehead.
Exactly.
As long as you just stick a vibration sensor and put in the correct algorithm to it, right?
Yeah, that's it in a nutshell. Wherever there's signal, we can basically try and understand the different types of sounds occurring on those objects or devices. Yeah.
How sensitive is it to different kinds of touch? So with a smartphone, you got the drag. You can do a 2-finger touch. You can do the.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not trying to compete with capacitive touch or these other kind of touch screen devices, which are way more expensive and more precise. But it's more opening a space of different possibilities with a very cheap sensor. You can put cost pennies to attach a piezo to any surface, and we can make that surface very intelligent. We can tell the difference between a tap and a knock or sliding, things like that. We've kind of moved away from the surface-based interaction stuff and are working more in airborne sound now. So
Hmm.
using just normal microphones, things like that.
Interesting. So, like, right, I saw from all the demos right now, it's just like in all the demos, there is like a computer attached to the thing only for like the purposes of like showing how it's like picking up the reading. And I imagine you'd be able to like program that to like, oh, turn the lights down a little bit, activate a security alarm. Uh,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, anything the designers can come up with. It's really meant to try and empower designers and innovators to think outside the box of a normal touchscreen device or mouse and keyboards, and instead of interacting with digital technology, just interacting with like wood,
mhm.
the things that are already there in place.
Yeah, it definitely brings to mind like the Tony Stark like open up just like I can type on whatever, like this is now a keyboard, I can just type in space, drag shit left and right.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Natural interaction as much as possible.
Hmm. I always imagined a lot of those cutscenes in like the Iron Man movies, because it's really like just Robert Downey Jr. in front of like a green screen, moving his hands, drawing circles in midair, like literally
Right.
in just a green room, doing nothing.
Absolutely. Yeah, it must be such a wild interaction. The opposite of natural interaction for sure.
And you said like moving towards AR, you said it's like air based or more audio based.
Yeah, that's right. So trying to work with uh, hopefully in the future our smartphone manufacturers and people that have fitness trackers, things like that, just to try and enable more context awareness in devices, things
Hmm.
like that.
So would you say this is more like your role in it as a CTO is it's more of like just kind of figuring out how the technology works with AI. I honestly can't figure it out because it's definitely not
Yeah,
like an art. It's not exactly an art medium.
no, not right now. Absolutely, it's not. It's basically pure research. Our company is very small, and we employ like data engineers and a couple AI researchers, and we're
Hmm.
basically trying to figure out the research problem of audio sound recognition and how it scales, how it can be employed on like billions of devices, basically.
Hmm.
That's the problem we're trying to solve.
What is the interaction with AI and creating these surfaces
What's the interaction with AI and what
and like creating like
surfaces?
the smart surfaces? I guess like how does that like play
Right.
towards like the sensors?
Yeah, we basically have developed a sort of interactive machine learning pipeline. I would say that's where a lot of our secret sauce is,
Hmm.
where we basically try to empower designers. We don't want to just kind of come up with the model and then that gets shipped and end of day. It's more uh, a sort of interaction with the model to try and refine it based on the designer's goals or the particular company's goals.
Hmm.
So we provide uh, basically a web-based platform that's that allows different companies to input their own data and
Hmm.
adopt their data to the models that we have and really understand the results of that and kind of morph the model in ways that is more suitable for their purposes.
So the company is less geared towards like manufacturing a product and more towards like creating tools for other developers to like engage different kinds of kinesthetic movement or whatever into like whatever thing they're trying to develop.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And other business units, not necessarily just developers, could be designers or whole company kind of profiles that just want to get a sense of what's possible very quickly.
Hmm. Cool. What is the Garden in the Machine Incorporated?
So that is kind of the other half of me. It's a company that kind of forms a lot of my arts practice. I use it as an interface for other companies that I work with. So I've worked with, people, different artists. I've worked with corporations as well, like Google, different art institutes, the LA Phil, and just trying to basically work with machine learning in an artistic way. That's kind of like informed by my own computational arts practice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very vague answer.
So it's more
Sure,
of like
yeah.
it's more like your just like your own like business hub for engaging artistically with different companies.
Right, yeah, with the focus on ML practices.
ML? Oh, machine learning.
Yeah, machine learning,
Right.
the
Yeah.
predecessor to AI.
Yeah, just like going through all of your all this stuff, like trying to figure out what you do. There's so many acronyms.
I know, that's computer science people. I was going to say CS people. CS people love acronyms.
Hmm. Yeah. So, what do you predominantly use? Like what tool do you use in creating like a computational art? Do you like make your own? Because I know you've released like two apps, or is it two or three?
Yeah, at least. I think maybe more like 10 or 11, but I don't know if
Because
any
I
of them are
see
still alive.
there's the real time auditory memory mosaicing and photosynthesizer.
Yeah, those are two that I developed for my PhD.
Hmm.
They're kind of, yeah. One is a sort of audio-based generative collage program, and the other is the same idea but for images, kind of geared toward generative painting.
Yeah. So for your thesis, you did like a YouTube mashup thing, and
Yeah,
I watched like one of the videos. I watched like I think the Pharrell Williams one from 2012. It's
oh
kind of a
wow,
mess.
they're all kind of a mess. It's like the perfect summary. It's kind of a mess. Yeah,
Hmm. So
yeah, it was a fun project.
I think this is like one of the things I'm kind of just like with the computational art, like the personal artistry beyond like the technology in it. Like where is the agency, I suppose, in like determining how if an art piece is like the way you want it to be? Like how much of it
Mm,
is like becomes deliberate if you run it against a bunch of things that you're kind of mishmashing, collabing. Um,
for sure. Yeah, like where's the narrative? Like where's the directorial stroke of a
mhm.
generative process? So for those works in particular, the I guess the direction comes from the source content that's being used and
Mhm.
how that source content is then matched to some target content. So like unlike a say like a GAN algorithm, which has been trained on millions or billions of images, and then you have an infinite space of possibilities, and you have to kind of like curate a generative image out of that infinite space.
Mhm.
The kind of approach that my PhD work took was more you have an empty canvas, you don't know anything, and slowly you're going to start learning things and interpret the world based on what you're slowly learning. So it's more tied, I think, to like the understanding of how we perceive and how meaning is
Yeah. Okay.
formed.
So
So those
when you're
kinds of
saying
questions.
you mean like us humans as opposed to like
Yeah,
uh okay, us humans,
yeah,
not the computers.
yes, us primitive humans.
I mean, I'm seeing so like with GAN, generative adversarial networks, like it's two neural nets that are kind of like talking, like one makes a thing and the other one essentially just kind of like checks and decides whether or not this is good or this is bad. Uh, and then
Yeah.
you can I was playing around with like a tool, I think it's like a Hugging Face or something, huggingface.co, and you put in just miscellaneous prompts and then like a source picture, and then it kind of goes in that direction based on I don't know what seed does. I don't know what step size and iterations does. But like, I think this is kind of like where I'm wondering how much like what you can do to shape it in a way that's like this is how I wanted it to be, versus like
Hmm.
just kind of like hitting randomizer until you like come up to one that's like okay, this one looks good.
Totally. Yeah. I I guess with these newer algorithms, the possibilities are really endless. Whereas the kind of work that I was doing in the past is more I was designing the algorithm, uh, from scratch to really try and mimic the perceptual processes that I was interested in. So it
Hmm.
was more about the marriage of the algorithm and the data and having the generative output feedback on the design of the algorithm to try and
Hmm.
understand like what it's capable of explaining, what it's not capable of explaining. And the initial kind of design of the algorithm was based on the theory, cognitive science theory that says, for instance, that we represent the world using proto objects. There's some sort of subconscious or unconscious representation, and throughout the ages there have been different terms for these things, but they all kind of refer to some sort of unconscious memory representations that support our ongoing scene perception of the world. And that's
Hmm.
kind of what I wanted to get at, like what are those, what do they look like and feel like?
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like a Plato's cave, like we're seeing the
Yeah,
shadows, and then like you leave and come
step out.
back, and as you try to,
Absolutely.
as you play Bodhisattva, trying to get other people to like step outside of the cave, like everybody is like, "The fuck are you talking about? You seem really fucked up. I think we need to sit you back down in front of this wall."
Absolutely, yeah. One of those apps that I mentioned, the Memory Mosaic one,
Hmm.
the idea with that is that you could record content from one scene and then, literally step out of the cave into another scene and have it interpret that space. And I remember one of the first times that I had like an aha moment with that app was I was in a concert. It was in Cafe Otto in London, and it was like a Peter Brosman concert, and just mostly just like loud squealing saxophone, brilliant.
Hmm.
And I was using the app. I stepped out of the concert, and there was a bus that had passed, and I had asked the app to stop learning and interpret the world, and I'm just listening at that point. And I hear the bus go by, but it's interpreted as a saxophone. You hear just like saxophone as the bus stops and squeals to a halt.
So like the new
And I was like,
sounds it
oh,
hears, it like reinterprets based on the thing that you trained it on. So like the like walking
yeah,
down the street sounds like saxophone music.
yeah, or whatever is closest to that
Hmm.
every sound that's being played, based on what it had heard before.
It sounds pretty trippy.
Yeah, absolutely. It really,
Like I
I mean, that was I guess that was the inspiration. It was a lot of psychedelic experience.
Yeah, I definitely get the feeling that like a lot of both the art and the music that would come around out of this space is very much like a really weird head trip. If you had somebody do some like ayahuasca or like
Yeah,
and then just like sit and watch some generative art.
yeah. I wouldn't wish that upon anyone, but I
It
think it
sounds
would
like
be.
some like Dumbo pink elephant shit.
Yes, exactly. Dumbo like somehow finds himself inside a barrel of alcohol, but somehow decides to trip acid as a result.
Hmm. So like I guess then like what is artistry to you? Um
Yeah,
like
it's
what's
a
your like
practice.
artistic ethos?
Wow, that's a good question. I would say that it's developing a practice that feels lifelong and kind of
Hmm.
has inescapable questions that you keep asking. There's obviously also the commercial side of that, and I don't think I am a practicing artist. Like I have a day job that is not artistic. I would say it's purely, to earn money, and
Hmm.
it is another kind of lifelong mission of mine. But I get to use parts of my artistic practice within that work, and that informs, like, I guess, my actual artistic practice. But I'm not producing work for sale. I'm not, I guess, caught up in the commercial game, and that that has just been like a choice of mine to, I think, stay away from that space, and a very privileged one that I have.
So you're not exactly the biggest fan of like the new like NFT space, like modern art stuff.
Um, I guess I have different reasons for kind of not yet stepping into the NFT space. I think there are a lot of questions that have to be asked that maybe aren't yet being asked,
Mm-hmm.
and I love that artists are being paid. That's like revolutionary. That's great. I'm very happy that that's happening. I guess I'm just questioning the longevity of that space and whether or not young people are getting caught up in a social media influence game that
Mm-hmm.
might not have longevity and doesn't have the criticality that I think an arts practice needs. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, and a little worried about where that direction of that space is going.
Yeah, I think like to me, just one of the not exactly a red flag, but like a yellow stoplight with a lot of like NFT stuff is more just the fact that um, it's able to grow and flourish in a way, partly because right now governments don't know how to regulate. They don't understand more or less know how to properly regulate the NFT space or like crypto in general. And so once we actually have some like tech savvy people shaping policy instead of just like shaping the growth of technology, like I think that's where I'm curious as to how the space is going to be able to develop in a way that is either helped or potentially like hindered by governments.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. I have no idea how that will play out. It's,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of, I suppose, money laundering happening in that space, and governments will want to step in and try and control that. I have no idea how. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's an interesting future.
Yeah, with like particularly this like generative art, I know like a lot of the concern has been with like deep fakes and like impersonating real people. But at the same time, like the it's also a technology that like governments are very interested for, like you said earlier, military purposes for surveillance.
Yeah, a lot of nefarious purposes. I mean, a lot of the tech grew out of, say, like ARPA research, advanced research programs, which are, U.S. government funded uh, research wing for military and
Mm-hmm.
internet itself, and long kind of crazy history that just is funded by warfare and the military.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's a very strange, dark history.
I do still
But it's
wonder.
not to say all the technology is. Yeah.
I do still wonder how much like the Pentagon actively like seeds funding for development of a lot of like these new open source technologies, just because like I don't know, the Pentagon one just has such an enormous budget. Like they've actively thrown shitloads of money at like Hollywood in order to get like more positive representations of the military in movies. Like the Transformers movies are infamous for like the blatant glorification of soldiers and racist robots.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think we're in a space now where the bulk of that research maybe isn't funded by military as much. I mean, that budget is still enormous and ridiculous, but you also have this sort of corporate uh, nation structures now where the Googles and Facebooks of the world also have that kind of money and are doing a lot of the research.
Mm-hmm. What do you
Yeah,
say
so
is kind
it's
of like? What would you say is kind of like an aesthetic that you really either like strive for or like inspires you?
hmm, I guess I'm not a very aesthetic person. I think I'm very much involved in the process. I think
Hmm.
that's for me where the artistry is. I'm caught up in technique and form and how things are made, sort of like hacker mindset.
So it's more of like the
Very
climb than
much
like the
involves.
more of the climb than like the mountain, the peak of the mountain.
Yeah, exactly. It's the way, but it's not really the end point. Yeah, I think
So do you?
that's a really interesting, yeah, description of it. I'm not. That's probably why I don't also frame the outputs. It's
Mhm.
just part of the practice.
Would you say that like an amount of the beauty is kind of in like the perspectives of it, or do you think like the perspectives of like a lot of the technology that's being developed now is more of like a cautiously optimistic, but also like potentially super scary?
Mm.
Like, do you think that is any part of like why the field fascinates you, the technology like appeals to you?
Ooh, the fact that it's also scary, the space of possibilities. I mean, I would say more so in the recent years, that's the question I've asked. Whereas in the beginning of my practice, I wasn't asking those questions.
Hmm.
So I think I'm a lot more cognizant of the problems of this technology now than I ever was. I wasn't really um, thinking about, say, like digital colonial extraction or, the idea that machine learning is basically digital colonialism.
Hmm.
Those sort of questions didn't enter my thought process until 2 years ago, basically.
Machine learning is oh yeah, so it's digital colonialism in that like because you're scraping just like shitloads of images and data from like just everywhere. It's just kind of like taking things and then putting your name on it.
Totally, yeah. I mean, the idea of data mining is like it even uses the terminology of mining and who and what are you mining? You're mining culture effectively, and if you're an artist, I suppose, processes of cultural appropriation, content that has been mined from Flickr or Instagram, and hardworking artists, I suppose, have created content and creating hopefully new aesthetics and new possibilities from that space. But also, you could just create the same content and
Hmm.
uh, call it your own.
Yeah, so like back to that YouTube video, the mashup. So it was you were trying to effectively recreate the number one YouTube video of was it like of the day or of the week based on uh, data that you could gather from the rest of the top 10 videos from YouTube.
Exactly. Yeah, I was trying to learn to create a viral video and wanted to keep that process going until it synthesized its own video.
Hmm.
But it kind of stopped short because I kept getting, takedown notices from
Oh,
YouTube, and at one point I couldn't even log into my Gmail, and they made me take this ridiculous quiz on copyright and watch this video by Happy Tree Friends, the animation series.
hmm.
It's a very violent series, and
Yeah, that's like where like the bunnies and teddy bears are like
yep,
fucking and murdering each other, right?
exactly, yeah. So that was the informative video from Google in order to teach you about copyright. Uh,
We're gonna murder your fucking teddy bear and bunny and then fuck you with their
Pretty
blood.
much, yeah. Yeah, it was a mind fuck for sure. Uh, but I refuted all the copyright infringement claims. I sent them basically the abstract of my PhD, and they all just like, I guess,
Nobody's gonna
shrugged.
fucking read that. I looked at it. It's like 300 pages.
That's what they say. No one will ever read it, but it's there. Yeah,
I actually
definitely a
pulled
waste
it
of
up.
paper.
I pulled it up as just like part of like my preliminary research, audiovisual scene synthesis, which like honestly it's pretty
Sweet.
concise. I've seen way worse naming
Mm.
for like large papers. It's pretty succinct, honestly.
Yeah, the working title was audiovisual content information display, just so that I could have an acronym of ACID. And it's like, no, it's too much.
Uh, Yeah, I mean, it doesn't mention like uh with like the anthropology of like subcolonial militant resources or something. So I mean, this is definitely a palatable title, but man, is it dense. Like
I know, I know. Each
you're
chapter
certainly,
is just like you.
yeah, you're certainly an academician, academic. I think academic is the easier way to say it.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Very academic work.
So right now you live in LA. Where are you from? Are you originally from California?
I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware,
Hmm.
which people might know as the current home of Joe Biden,
Oh, gross.
where we're at. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, I grew up there.
and you went to University of Delaware,
That's right.
and then you studied in London for I don't know how many years.
Yeah, well, I first went to Edinburgh, did my master's there in robotics and AI, and then moved to, I was still in Edinburgh. I did 2 years of research in cognitive science, visual cognition, and then moved down to London, did my PhD at Goldsmiths, and went
Hmm.
to Dartmouth after that for a postdoc, working with fMRI,
You
and
you
then
taught a little
eventually
bit
made my way
in
here.
places, didn't you?
Yeah, I taught in Edinburgh, taught at Goldsmiths, taught at Dartmouth, taught at Cal Arts here in LA, and most recently in UCLA.
I feel like just like so looking at your website and your what is essentially your CV, you are like the one person that fulfills like if you want to apply for anything where it's got like oh you got to have like 15 years of expertise in this like particular field and have 40 different things actually like 40 different tools mastered. I think you're
Well,
the only
yeah,
person
I
who
mean,
doesn't have to like bullshit their way through an interview.
I don't know. I feel like I have to bullshit extra hard because as like an interdisciplinary researcher, you have the breadth of many different things, but not necessarily the depth of any one thing. And yeah, I mean, I have basically the experience up until a point in time, and then I might move into another field, and my understanding of the previous field is locked in time from that point. And, I read things here and there, and I try to keep up to date, but
Hmm.
it's nothing like an academic of a single discipline would have. So I think it's challenging for that purpose, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I can't be, I think, entertained by only one discipline. It's very difficult.
Hmm. Yeah. So in terms of like goals and journeys, so like I think you said either the one that you're currently doing or the one you did most recently was like reading one scholarly article per day, which that sounds like that sounds like a nightmare, first of all.
Why? It's like reading a news article once a day, but
Well, hold on. So
there's
when you say like a scholarly article, are you reading like an entire research paper? Was that it, or was it more like a synopsis of of a full
no,
like thing?
yeah, well, reading one research article, but you don't have to dig into the weeds of it. Like I might gloss over the methods, really, and just kind of get the story of what they're
Uh huh.
claiming.
So what did you stick to like particular disciplines of like of interest, or did you just kind of like throw a dart at the research library or whatever, and wherever sticks, you decide to read that for the day?
Yeah, it's sort of like one article leads to another. Like very often, I might not even get past the intro of an article because I'll have 10 more articles that they've referenced. And I'm like, oh, I need to read that article first in order
Hmm.
to get the context and understand this one. So it's really kind of following the history of the research to a point where I'm like, okay, I've reached the 1800s. I can probably stop, or
Hmm.
it's a very new field and there isn't too much context.
What kind of like what fields would you predominantly read from? So were you predominantly reading things within like computer science stuff, or were you also like just perusing through like a microbial biology paper or something?
Actually, yeah, both of those. It's pretty much the gamut. COVID was very much in my mind, and it was reading a lot about like phenotypes and just phylogenetic trees, and I don't know, just all this stuff that I had no idea about.
Hmm.
And then also reading about like the crypto space and trying to understand like what's the academic research within the crypto space, and then keeping up to date with AI and machine learning practices, things like
Hmm.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like I'm definitely kicking myself for not like doing it, for not like actually trying harder at my like undergrad, because one of my definite so I studied economics and literature, and like one of my things that I really wanted to get into studying with economics was like cryptocurrencies. But at the time, like so it was like between 2012 and 2015, like it was still like a pretty new thing. There wasn't like much research, there wasn't much technology around it
Yeah.
that had hit the mainstream. And anytime I mentioned it to any of my professors, they had nothing to say about it really.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
but
Yeah, I
god
think
damn it, man.
it's never too late. I mean, lifelong researcher or lifelong student is definitely my mission.
Hmm.
I think some of the interesting work I did see from that time in the crypto space, in the academic space, was very informed by the direction of the search that I was involved in. But there was like agent-based models of smart contracts and
Hmm.
uh, yeah, trying to understand like adversarial attacks for a smart contract. So I thought that was really interesting.
At the
Um,
time, were smart contracts so between 2012 and 2015, because wasn't Ethereum founded in like 2012-ish? I don't remember.
right. Yeah, it might not have been smart contracts per se, but it was really just trying to understand like how people could game the crypto space and try
Hmm.
to build, I guess, adversarial attacks in that space and simulate that space.
Yeah, I remember at the time. Yeah, I think Bitcoin was like the only thing that like so Bitcoin and then like a few different altcoins were the only things that were like alive during that time. And so and
Right.
nobody was actually following it. Nobody was there wasn't really like an ether scan or I don't know if CoinGecko was even around then.
Yeah.
Um
Pretty
so just like
nascent for sure.
trying to like find any actual like scholarly articles or economic research on the field is very much just like read the white paper, buy the coin.
Yeah. Cryptonomicon. Yeah. Very nascent stuff for sure.
So you studied artificial intelligence as like part of your master's, and you kind of still do like AI work. Um, how close are we to Skynet?
um, I would say it's here in many forms already. Like
Hmm.
you do have a lot of control of content and thought and influence of thought, kind of directorial influence of people and kind of social credit systems
Hmm.
everywhere. Like even if you were to compare Shenzhen to say like Western economies, we have our own forms of social credit that are
Hmm.
being watched and inform what you're capable of doing, like if you can get credit or not, things like that.
Hmm.
Um, so I would say it's here in many forms and enforced in surveillance systems and in many forms. And yeah,
But what about like towards like a general, in terms of like a general intelligence kind of thing, where it's like just it's like self cognizant and able to like assert its own will?
right.
Because
I
I've seen
guess
videos of like Elon Musk like just try like pleading with people like we need to stop AI stuff. We need to. I mean, I know he's a fucking weirdo, but like it is very like looming, especially in like the tech space. People either say that it's an insane thing that's not going to happen, or like no, it's halfway that we're already halfway there.
yeah, I guess people have this image of Skynet as being like a central authority figure where there's going to be like one entity that controls thought and dictates, actions. But for
Hmm.
me, intelligence has never been like that. Intelligence is a distributed, worldwide network, and that's what we have in terms of AI systems currently.
Hmm.
So I don't think that. we'll ever see a central authority like dictating actions, like a sort of dictatorship of AI.
Hmm.
I'm not sure if that's the future that we're headed to. I do see that within, like, say, certain decision processes like drone attacks or things
Hmm.
that are maybe have like split-second decision actions that are controlled by AI. I would see that as something that is the closest form of that. But
Hmm.
yeah, that crops up in a lot of spaces, I think.
I mean, it's very
Policing,
much
basically.
ever since like the dawn of like automation and stuff, people have been freaking out about like robots taking people's places. And as we do increase like uh, automation, machine learning with things,
Mm.
I don't know. I'm still I'm still generally pretty optimistic about things. But at the same
Mm.
time, because I don't explicitly work in the space of like developing things. I know the word algorithm, but I couldn't for the life of you like tell you how to make one or like how anybody goes about doing any of that shit.
Yeah, it's a bunch of like primitives stacked together until they do something useful, basically. Yeah,
Hmm.
but it's yeah, it's an interesting space. It's rifled with problems, systemic problems, obviously, that it just get like exacerbated as you scale the technology to the size of society and like put
Hmm.
them in your phones, in
Hmm.
police stations, things like that. Like it's rifled with problems, but there's also so much possibility, I think, for understanding human nature, understanding perception, understanding art, asking critical questions as well. And like as artists, I think work outside the box and interrogate the system that is AI and get into the box. I think that's where a lot of interesting questions are asked.
Hmm. I think with like AR and VR, kind of like with like what the things you've been working on, uh, what I kind of like envision being like one of the goals of it would be like being able to like actually show another person like your dream that you had, like train a
Yeah.
machine on like what was like firing off in your brain, and then have another person actually be able to see that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, there was work in like 2012 by Jack Clark in Berkeley, and they were working on this problem. There was
Hmm.
another research lab in in Japan. I'm going to forget the last names, but that really inspired me. During my PhD, and I wanted to work on that exact problem. And
Hmm.
I was lucky enough to work with a Dartmouth lab for my postdoc, working on imagined music and imagined sound.
Hmm.
And we worked on this problem of, could we use an fMRI scanner to train how we hear sounds and then have somebody imagine a sequence of sound and reconstruct that imagination of sound.
Hmm.
And it sort of worked, actually.
Really.
Yeah. It was focusing on musical scales, so it wasn't like
Hmm.
anything too complex. And there's a huge constraint with fMRI that it's very slow temporally. So it's like every 2 seconds you get a note. So it's pretty limiting in what you can do. But I imagine that technology just gets better and better, and you
Yeah, I
compare it with
imagine
other
like
technologies.
especially if you're able to like get down like human dreams, it's not too far off from like being able to see what like a dog sees, or like what's a cat thinking when it's like pushing over your glass of water.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's wild to think about. I imagine those dreams are. Yeah, I'm not sure what to think, but yeah, it'd be wild.
Um, so I'm a big video game person. What would you
Mm.
say are kind of like because video games are very much at like the intersection of a lot of different like, artistic practices. Uh, do you think it could ever get to the point in terms of like generative art that like you could train it to like you plug in a Super Mario, Legend of Zelda, and like a Halo game, and then it would like mash them together and create a game that like you know.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I think that's where a lot of procedural content generation is heading. And some of the earliest forms of, or like the merger of AI and gaming that I had seen was, I think like the earliest example was Facade, this game from like 2000, 2006, I want to say. No, it was much earlier. Maybe it was like 2005. And it was an interactive storytelling game where it was a sort of like infinite space of possible narratives, sort of like a choose your own adventure, but more so than having different paths, it was sort of working in your answers into how the narrative would develop.
Mm-hmm.
So I would love to see that kind of thing more in gaming, where it's not a fixed linear narrative, it's not like a predetermined set of paths, but it's really procedurally generative content based on the actions that you take.
So this 2006 game could like make up new endings.
The premise was that you were a guest at somebody's house and you're going for dinner, and it's a couple and they're basically going through a marital problem, and they dictate how the dialogue is formed throughout the passage of time, and things that you say will like come back into the fold in that process. It was really advanced. It was absurd. It's like a 5-minute game that was like 2 GB download or something.
Yeah, I just looked it up. It's apparently in the 1001 video games you need to play before you die.
Nice.
Artificial intelligence-based interactive story. Yeah, I don't know. Like, well, I know like one of the big hallmarks for like role-playing games where your actions kind of influence the character and how they develop story-wise is like the Mass Effect series. I know the last one, Mass Effect Andromeda, like it bombed really hard just because like the graphics and everything, like it went to absolute shit, and there was almost no directorial direction with like the facial recognition for the voice actors. But like the original three games were pretty solid, and like what you did in one game would like it would one, it would influence different events in that game by itself, but also like the save would transfer over to the second game, and it would remember like what you did to this one character, what backstory you decided to pick in the first game,
Oh, nice.
your moral alignment, and it continued throughout all three of the games.
Right. Yeah, that seems like a popular directorial control, like the sort of D&D chaotic neutral alignments. Or
It's Paragon
yeah.
and Renegade, which are definitely like way more badass ways of saying neutral or good and evil.
Right. Yeah, much better. I prefer it. We have to get the church on board with that.
Oh man, if you could actually change all of like because I know like GPT-3 is definitely doing a lot of like it's co-authoring uh a lot of like founding texts now. I wonder what happens if you like mash it together with just like if you mash like the Bible together with a bunch of other like religious texts. What
Oh,
religion you
no.
get out of that?
The ultimate religion.
Like if we throw together like the King James Bible, uh, the Bhagavad Gita, the Quran.
Yeah,
I don't even know if you need to
absolutely.
put the Torah in there just because it's technically supposed to be like the first 5 books of the Bible. But like throw in some like Zoroastrianism and Vedic texts. You know, I think I could just get
Wow,
like a
yeah.
mega religion generated
Yeah,
from.
all the ancient knowledge just spewed together, and you can ask it anything. It would be the oracle of the ages, really.
I bet you it'd be just like God is pissed. Do what he says.
Oh no. Yeah. Yeah, there'd be a lot of destruction from like the 6 creation accounts of the Bible alone. So
I'd be very curious as to like the inventiveness with its miscellaneous plagues and how it decides to smite people. Like a plague of
right.
locusts goes right up that guy's ass.
Oh no. Uh, Yeah, it would be interesting the similarities that it picks up across different texts for sure.
Especially with like meter. I don't know how the I don't know how GPT-3 works with like different languages, but I wonder if it would be able to pick up uh like rhyme, meter, prose of different styles of prose.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder, I mean, a lot of these algorithms were trained on, um, I imagine GPT-3 as well was trained on a large book corpus, and it might have that knowledge in there somehow. And it's just a matter of how you seed the generation now, and like what is the context for which you want to extract from this model.
What makes GPT-3 like so unique in terms of like a new AI that everybody's really hyped about? Or it's a learning model, right? Machine learning model.
Yeah, yeah. I suppose just the amount of content that it was able to train, the scale of the model and the scale of the data set was really part of the uniqueness and also one of the aspects of the model architecture, I suppose.
Hmm. What are the things that are kind of like because you work in the space with like machine learning, um, AI and art, like what are like things to you that strike as like this is a hallmark of something that uh this is something that's like new and profound, or this is something that is like has staying power beyond just being like the next iteration in this this growing technology.
Yeah, I would say a lot of the kind of work being done in ethical AI, like just
Ethical AI.
uh, yeah, a lot of the understanding of how these tools are perhaps like biased, how they're
Hmm.
being used in practice, and where the problems are. A lot of the questions basically being asked of these algorithms of whether or not they're suitable or they should be used. That definitely is something that's new, for me in the last 2 years, for having worked in the space of AI since, my first AI course was 2004. So I've been
Oh.
working in the field for a long time,
Hmm.
and really only getting that question 2 years ago seems very, new for me.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, just understanding the systemic issues with AI. I think that's a very growing narrative and field that you can get behind. As a new researcher, if you're interested in the space, that's where I would start. Definitely looking at institutes like AI Now and seeing what they're up to in terms of how AI can be critically engaged with, I suppose. And there are also, I suppose, other aspects like I'm really interested in the work that the Santa Fe Institute is doing, tackling like problems like global scale, weather scale problems,
Hmm.
also like epidemic problems like looking at COVID and spread of transmission. Another interesting kind of large scale problem within AI that could be employed.
Hmm.
Those are fairly new, I suppose, for me as well.
I know there was a that actually kind of reminds me there was apparently some sort of like huge server-wide glitch in in World of Warcraft. Um, I'm trying to remember. So like it was. I think a lot of people, epidemiologists, started like using this as like a case study for how people are able to how likely people are to transfer something after just being given information, not necessarily being given like tons of consequences. But like there was some glitch in World of Warcraft where you would go into some raid dungeon, which like you would need to be a certain level to do, and you would get some sort of virus from like the monster, and if you like leave the dungeon, you're for some reason like the virus would stay with your character depending on oh god, I really wish I could recall this a little bit better. But basically, people were able to like leave the raid with this virus, and it eventually ended up infecting so many different servers and across different. the different countries and everything, because like and people knew that this virus was happening, and it was like making it was very problematic for especially like the lower level players.
Oh, that's brilliant. I love that.
But
Yeah,
like
I think that
this was used by a lot of epidemiologists as like this demonstrates how fucking shitty people
I
are
bet
with responding to advisories
rate of
against
transmission.
interaction.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's brilliant. Yeah, I mean, simulation environments, gaming environments, as those get better, and I think it's one of the most interesting kind of toolkits for understanding human nature, for sure.
Hmm.
Uh, it's something that I wish I learned more about, like working with tools like Unreal and Unity.
Hmm.
Um, I still haven't like approached that space, but it's something that I hope I get my hands dirty with at some point.
Yeah, the video game space, like it's really caught in this like battle of just of being able to create something like artistically and narratively impressive and rigorous versus something that's just kind of like it's something that you could do competitively or just like leisurely in order to escape, because there's so much escapism just absolutely everywhere in video games.
Yeah.
But then
Mm.
you also get like those games that are like profound in the way they just tell stories in worlds that we only imagine. And I would really look forward to like whenever like this intersection kind of happens with uh generative artwork, generative music, and how they're able to create like more profound stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I guess one of the challenges generative or procedural content designers will have in that space is that when you have a space of infinite possibilities, what is the directorial control?
Hmm.
How do you narrate something that has an infinite space of possibilities and without it feeling like noise effectively?
Hmm. And this is where like I would think like the promptism kind of comes in, where where you're just like putting in like the different prompts to make this game have either this feeling or this kind of direction thematically.
Right. Yeah. Giving it some context. Yeah, it's really powerful concept. Have you come across games that, or even like indie games or online games that have started to employ these techniques? I guess like AI Dungeon is one that comes to mind. But
uh
and
like man, I really don't know if I have come across it. I honestly probably didn't realize it.
right,
um but I don't know, there's a lot of there's a lot of like experimentation that's like happening in both with a lot of indie games that have now been able to become released just because uh there's been like kind of an indie renaissance, but also like
mm,
big developers and are kind of like restructuring, like Hideo Kojima, who I think the most recent game they put out was Death Stranding. It's like to most people like a walking simulator. I actually still need to play it, and I haven't been spoiled, so I'm looking forward to getting into that. But I imagine he's somebody who would be doing something like crazy uh,
right,
with AI, just because so many of his games deal with uh, the interaction of like technology and humanity and how we need to like restructure ourselves in society depending on like what are the needs. Are we
yeah,
separated like based on communication? Are we separated because of nation states? Are we separated because of access to technology? Uh, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. That seems like an early sort of cinematic experience, procedural cinematic experience already, but adding, I guess, the sort of interactive storytelling component that AI text-based narratives would afford is, I could totally see him doing that as well. That's a really good point.
But I would also
Looking
like
forward to that.
I would be curious about like how much that then drives more escapism. Just because like if you're given like an infinite playground and you're able to like create new endings every single time, you don't really need to leave the game for any reason. Like, you don't need to explore new games. You don't need to indulge different vices if you found the one that like it hits it hits that fetish, you know?
Right. Yeah, it's the ultimate simulator. Yeah. It's an interesting space. I also wonder if like the generative image stuff or generative sound stuff will come into play, or that stuff seems farther out in terms of quality and like speed of what's possible. But certainly the text-based stuff and feeding into speech synthesis stuff, that all seems well within reach for today's games.
Mm-hmm. It'd be great to like throw in like a GPT-3 like speech bot on top of like Animal Crossing, and just like you're just talking with all the animals and they're responding to you organically and intelligently.
Oh my gosh. Oh no. Yeah, is that a moddable game? Can you do that?
I'd love like they just start questioning, why are you still farming carrots? This is a waste of your time. You're going to die. We are eternal.
Yeah, you'd have to give everybody a certain personality, like phenotype, and that would be great.
Let him farm the carrots.
Yeah.
It's his life to lose and waste.
Yeah. Well, I hope like social interaction stays a mainstay in those games, at least, so that you're not just interacting with AI, but yeah, people are very much still part of that picture.
I think definitely one of the also like one of like the hallmarks with just like the development video games have been going toward the direction video games have been going towards, the fact that it's always re-upping the ante when it comes to horror games. Because like horror games, it's supposed to disturb you. It's supposed to fuck with you. Like there was a game that like it's called a Doki Doki Literature Club, which it's at first glance is just like this cute little dumb dating sim, but then like one of the characters in the game starts fucking with the game files, and like one of the characters commits suicide. Another one like she like breaks her neck and like rushes you and like it fucks with you because these are things that you're really not expecting, and you know these are just newly capable. The Five Nights at Freddy's series was I think the original game was made in like either a 24-hour period or like a 1 week period for like a game jam thing. Or I might be thinking of like Slender, but it's a bunch of just like still images and jump scares, and you deal with the mechanics and that otherwise like jump scares you. And I think this is definitely one of the things that like a lot of these games, whenever they have that interactivity of with the real world, like it's gonna get real mindfucky, and at some point it's gonna get like, I don't know, as fun and whimsical as things can get. Yeah. Well, that I think that would be the thing. Like at a certain point, you can't say this isn't real if it's like really creating something that's new, depending on how you're interacting with it. You know?
Yeah. I guess it just rifled with problems as soon as I think about it. Like, what if it's? Yeah, I don't know. The real stories out there that scare us are actually like horrible, and we don't want to relive, I think.
But then also like, you know, when you create like, you know, in like endings and characters that are responding to you, and like you reset the game and you're like changing all of their personalities, like do you have some sort of ethical responsibility towards those like digital characters, and that whatever that happens in that world and storyline, if they have like an actual generated thing that is because of what you put into the game?
Because there's some possible sense that they're conscious, or why?
I don't know. Like if you create like a dating bot, and like it falls in love with you and you fall in love with it, do you still have the right to reset it if it like bugs you? I don't know.
This is the narrative of many stories. And Charlie Brooker's or this, I think there was one episode that followed this as well. Yeah,
or like the Rick and Morty the Rick and Morty, like the mini universes that he uses to power his car battery.
The battery, yes.
Is there an ethical responsibility to those things?
I mean, I think we know the answer is no. I think we probably have some deeper ethical responsibilities to the, I suppose, the life that we do know about and can ascribe life to currently, um, before we start ascribing life to bits and silicon. But I imagine that as these things get more integrated into other systems, that we will start ascribing life to it. It's just not, we have to kind of reevaluate what life is in our existing systems before we start ascribing life to these kind of new silicon-based systems.
Yeah,
I think software computing becomes more predominant, and there are actual like organic mechanisms that introduce, say, exchange of information, in which case the lines get even further blurred.
Yeah, I think PETA is going to get real weird.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, no, actually it'd be perfect. It'd just be people for the ethical treatment of silicon pets. That honestly feels better.
Oh no. Yeah. I suppose I'm interested in what would happen as, like, let's say you've got a brain lesion and we develop some soft robotic system to replace some neural circuitry, and that is a robot that is also part of an existing human, that we had no problem questioning their intelligence and consciousness. Shutting down that system is totally unethical. But
are you saying, like, in the case of like somebody has like Alzheimer's or a degenerative brain disease, and they have some sort of like circuitry in order to like help their brain maintain function?
Right. Yeah, we kind of view that as an augmentation of in a human, but maybe it could also be viewed as like an agent, its own robotic sort of conscious system, and it's integrated within another one. So I guess that's kind of where I'm going with this sort of idea of systems of intelligence, and the complexity of what we think of as consciousness is not tied to a single brain or single body even. It's very much a distributed consciousness that we're all engaged in.
So aside from like work, robots, AI stuff, what else have you been generally doing? So you say you've started playing some tennis.
Yeah. A very friendly activity for COVID. I highly recommend it, especially if you have access to that. It's great exercise, and if you can be outside, it's great.
Did you have to learn tennis recently, or did you like play before and you're just like picking it up now again?
Both. I mean, I did play it in high school, but I wasn't ever very good. And I would say I'm still not very good, but I really enjoy it. It's a lot of fun.
And any like movies, books you've been reading?
Yeah.
Good parties,
yeah, it was just
artists. I don't know.
All of that, absolutely. Yeah, I've been reading a lot about like complexity science and cell life.
Man,
I was just talking about this book with a friend. Somebody had recommended me Lewis Thomas, and he's written about a lot of different things, but I really love this book, Lives of a Cell. And there's this beautiful passage in the book where he's talking about like an alien, like somebody who studies cell life. I forget the terminology for it. What is that?
a biologist?
Yeah, I suppose a biologist. Yeah,
or a microbiologist, so like an alien biologist.
Yeah, there's some word. I always forget what it is. It's not etymologist, because that's like the study of words. It's not entomologist, I think, which is like an insect.
Cytologist.
Anyway, something like this.
Cytology.
Okay. there we go. An alien cytologist, um, like comes and observes Earth as somebody would observe, like a new cell sample on their plate, as they take their microscope and try to study this new organism. What would it mean for like an alien visitor to come and see the Earth and dissect the Earth as an intelligent species? And what would it subscribe as like the actuators of this organism and the sensing mechanisms of the of that organism? And it would see like satellites placed here and there, and things that are emitting radar, just because that's what NASA is doing. It's just like trying to understand the universe, right? I just loved that shift in perspective, like to think of the Earth as
is this alien like really big or something?
It could be, I don't know, it could just be like a probe, like a Voyager sort of thing, and just
no, because I'm imagining the like those aliens from the end of the first Men in Black, where they're like playing marbles with like galaxies or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Or, trying to build a highway through our own solar system.
Yeah, I'm still making my way through the second book in like the three body problem series. Yeah, you read it?
Yes, I read the first book. Yeah, I haven't gone on to the other two, but definitely enjoyed that.
Yeah, so it like, not to spoil anything, but like you learn more about like the Trisolaran like culture a little bit.
Okay.
And like, I don't know, it's weird trying to like make your case as like a species that another species wants to like eradicate and take your resources for, and like try to make your case slash defend yourself, and like you kind of humanity's like at odds with what to do there.
Right.
And yeah, I don't know, I guess this like makes me wonder like what are the things of value that we're doing that people outside of our cultures and worlds would see as valuable. Because like, there are plenty of humans also who are just like, this art is stupid. This isn't art. Does it make money? But then like you think about money and like, oh, money's stupid. Like
yeah, I mean, basically just want a stable ecosystem where you can live in and 3 suns won't burn and kill you.
Or at least like
much.
You want a place where like it's predictable how regularly they'll burn and kill you.
Yeah, I mean, in that way, it's sort of like, yeah, we have it pretty good here. We just kind of have to take care of it.
One thing that like it's semi-regular, I think, in like it comes up in the book, cryo freezing people, and like to where you're able to wake them up, they don't just instantly die. How close are we to that in like real technology? I feel like we haven't. So I feel like it shouldn't be out of our reach, but like there's like the clear reason of why you wouldn't want to do that, because you don't want people just like like piecing out until like 100 years later, unless there's like a reason. So like in the story, they have a reason why they gotta do it, because there's like only so many there's only like there's like a finite amount of years left, and you need people to stick around to like oversee the planning and growth of stuff. But like right now, I feel like it's plausible, if not like already possible.
Yeah, I mean, all of my knowledge of this comes from movies that I've watched, so I'm probably very wrong about this, but I feel like we understand.
Let's be wrong together, at least.
Yeah, I think we understand how to cryogenically freeze somebody, but not how to do the like re-entry into normal kind of temperature. And so maybe there are organisms that are cryogenically frozen, but we're kind of just waiting for the technology to bring them back to life. Something like this. I'm not sure. I have no idea, though. It could be totally wrong.
Yeah, I mean, like, like I'd say like just easily the most famous case of that would be like the Walt Disney's. I don't know if it's his head or his brain that is like supposed to be hidden somewhere at Disneyland.
Is it? That makes so much sense. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's pretty much as good as
it's why
gone.
they're still holding on to the it's why they're still holding on to the Mickey Mouse copyright because
The copyright.
yeah, they want Disney to get back and do more things with him. Create the new Song of the South.
Dear God. Oh my God. I don't want to know what that Mickey Mouse is like. Just release Mickey. There should be a campaign to free Mickey.
Hashtag free
Free
Mickey.
Mickey from, from the grasps of Walt Disney.
Oh man, I imagine it'd get like if like if and whenever Disney happens to lose the ownership of like Mickey Mouse and like Donald Duck and Goofy and whatever, like China they've already banned Winnie the Pooh from just like from anywhere because people were memeing making Winnie the Pooh memes of Chairman Mao. And so he banned them from the country. And anything you post of like Winnie the Pooh is automatically censored.
That's so wild to think of Winnie the Pooh as like a revolutionary character.
Yeah, I think also recently like Peppa Pig has been getting some flack too, despite the fact that like how the fuck can you get anybody to look like Peppa Pig?
I know. What's that like new really disturbing one? I was visiting a friend. The animation on these cartoons now for like toddlers is so disturbing. It's like the top rated show on Netflix, or the #1 most watched. Oh, Coco Melon. Yeah. Have you ever seen Coco Melon?
I have no idea what that is.
Anybody who's listening that has a
this looks like a Pixar movie.
What I'm talking about. You wish it did, but it's so disturbing. The animation, there's just something so peculiar about the animation that it gets in your head and you can't help but look away from it. It's sort of like it's tapped into some neural circuitry that you can't look away from. It's very
the eyes are very
strange.
much like animatronic, like steal your soul material.
It's so weird. They figured out something that is like deep programming. Yeah.
Yeah.
If
I wonder.
Military funded, I would say that's something that's a psyop for sure.
Oh my God. Deep soldier Coco Melon agents. Sleeper Coco Melon agents.
Exactly. Yeah. 12 years later, that song unlocks something.
Activate Operation Coco Melon. The fuck did you just say? Yeah, I don't know. Like a lot of these old like national institutions and like production companies, I imagine they've got to change gears completely with like the way new technology is coming into things. You're able to do better research and get into more people's lives and more people's data. I wonder how much. So with businesses, I imagine like you either sink or swim, and like you're not gonna just get guaranteed money for no reason like the military is gonna do. But I wonder how much then, because like they don't have the threat of being like losing to competition, how much the military has to like actively like reinvent how they're using the new technology, new research methods and stuff.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I guess like there's the capitalist like hockey shaped curve that you always need to kind of earn more for your shareholders the next quarter than the previous one. Research comes into play there. Like I'm thinking of Netflix's model. It's such a strange space of how much data informs everything from the moment that a screenplay or like a script lands on somebody's desk. Data informs every decision up until the point that it's released, from like who's cast, where it's cast, what time of day it's cast, everything.
But then even then, like things like flop. The Mulan, the new Mulan remake it was directed specifically at like the Chinese market, and it flopped, despite the fact that they were constantly getting feedback from Chinese audiences, from Chinese directors. Like everything was geared to succeed in the Chinese market, but it still flopped. I read a little bit about the story of why it did so poorly. Apparently, they had released it digitally before it was in theaters, and some people like watched it ahead of time. There were a bunch of bad reviews, and so nobody went out to go to the theater to see it. And because it was like so formulaically, like clearly geared towards the Chinese market, without actually like apparently it was like directed by like three white people who uh essentially took like cookie cutter images out of like scenic rural China and didn't actually take into consideration any of the historic
Yeah.
influences and stuff.
It sounds like, like opening Taco Bell in Mexico. It's sort of what it sounds like to
Yeah,
me.
basically.
Yeah.
And it just did so fabulously bad, and maybe that's just like a case of like where the research, like that's just a demonstration of like a misapplication of the research and methods.
Mm.
But like, yeah, as we get better, I wonder how that's going to kind of like tip the scales in favor of like, the people who have the money to invest in all of the research, and knowing the best way to implement it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But seriously though, like Pentagon needs to get its shit together with where it's like throwing money. Apparently they, like one of the files of that was like declassified. I think like they sent like 26 million dollars worth, or like 30 million dollars worth of forest fatigues to Afghanistan, despite the fact that there's only like 3% of Afghanistan that has any forest in it.
Oh my God. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure that money is finding its way to somebody's pockets, but
Well, yes, I think that's my problem. It's like it's clearly just like a money laundering scheme uh for like arms companies.
absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it's a very sick system. How do you think that we start to engage with that, like build more transparency behind those systems?
Well, the market solution would be private military companies, private military corporations, which is also like the solution that like Hideo Kojima came up with in the Metal Gear Solid games, which is like I remember when my brother first started talking to me about crypto stuff. I'm like, okay, so no currency matters. Governments aren't able to control currency. What are the things that like matter if you're not able to kind of influence the value of your dollar and your purchasing power? Oh, it's gonna be who has the guns and who can like who can forcibly take stuff from you, and who are you able who's able to protect you. And so I don't know. It I don't know if it's like a logical conclusion or if they're like missteps that I'm making, but it just seems like, you know, uh, being able to tie your currency to a military force is probably like the most important thing that needs to happen with uh, digital currencies and stuff.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure I totally follow that. I guess I was wondering like how we build transparency on how the money's being used and whose hands it's being exchanged with. And privatizing part of that seems like it would make it more difficult then, wouldn't it?
Again, I feel like there are like steps that I'm missing. Uh,
Oh yeah.
but
I mean, I obviously don't have an answer to this either. It's just
like
yeah, it's
because
just,
you're trying to use the currency to purchase things, to get goods, to secure capital, get houses, build companies. But like, if a government isn't the one generating the money and like forcibly taking it, I guess they could tax crypto like exchanges, but then I don't know.
hmm. Yeah, yeah. I have no idea how the space is going to play out. It's very scary to me. Whatever happens, I'm sure it will have benefits and will also have significant problems as well. But
Yeah, interestingly, like as much as like every like futuristic, not even like dystopian world, but like even like the utopian worlds, there's never like a question about how like their like national credit system works. They always mention like federation credits or something. There's never really any deep dive into how people are going to, how the economy is going to work. There's always like the understanding of like, oh, there are companies that are doing like asteroid cracking or planet cracking. There's always companies doing like, you know, more investigation into extraterrestrial life or like deep space investigation stuff. But there's never really any question about how things are funded or where the money comes from or where it goes or how it's regulated. I imagine that would be
Absolutely.
incredibly monotonous to have to like read and write. But I don't know. I feel like, especially because it's such a predominant factor in how like most modern politics work, you'd think that there would be kind of more thinking going into how that's realized. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I guess you know, in order to create a utopia and like any world building exercise, you kind of have to solve these impossible systemic problems that we haven't you know, figured out how to solve without like, you know, wiping out I don't know, entire civilizations of people. I don't know.
But like literally
Yeah, and you,
everything like every future world works on a credit system. Like you never see somebody like handing another like space warrior like cash. Nobody's like, hey, do you got change for a
right,
10 in in on
right,
Coruscant?
or money out of that system, or it's been solved by this credit system. Yeah, I guess
Uh,
that's where a lot of economic structures and class systems come into play.
but like I don't feel like, you know, a single central currency. I that's definitely not the solution either. You know,
Right.
like a worldwide
Yeah.
monetary fund. I don't think that's a plausible thing.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. Economists have figured out a solution to this. It doesn't look like communism. It doesn't look like capitalism. Maybe it's something like democratic socialism. Uh, yeah.
Get out of here, Bernie Sanders.
Yeah. Maybe not led by another old white dude, but for sure
Hmm.
there is there are alternative systems that seem better at least.
Hmm. What would you say is like the future thing that you're most excited for?
Oof. I guess that we'll figure out how to persist beyond like the next 30 years is, you know, this kind of changing climate system. Just like having hope in science that science will figure out problems of like carbon sequestration and just like the imagination of human ingenuity and like being surprised by how beautiful that we can be as like a human species if we're working
Hmm.
together and set our minds to something.
It will be like impressive to see if we make it through like the next 30 years, as you said, like a transition to like an actual like proper sustainable ecology like worldwide.
Yeah.
What that's going to have to do to international commerce, because it's going to like entirely destabilize like a lot of the world structure just between like the Middle East and Russia no longer having as much of a like you know a say in world trade just because like their primary resources for, you know, exchanges are oil.
Right. Yeah. I have like a very small sense of hope that this is happening, but I'm really, really focusing on that somehow.
Yeah, I mean like hopefully with like getting off of like the legacy institutions and like power structures like denominated in oil, we'll be able to like refocusing on education and like getting people more into
Yes,
developing technology in like, you know, and implementing them
absolutely.
and giving accessibility to both banking and just like independent money management, like empowering
Yeah,
the people that so that they don't have to be like beholden to, you know, the oligarchs that control what every other facet of life. because they control like the thing that makes the most money.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Education from day one, like understanding money management, I think is a huge part of it. Also understanding like critical thinking. Like it's absurd to me that, you basically optionally are taught critical thinking once you hit college. Like that should be from day one, please. Like let's do that more.
I've actually talked with a couple other guests about like how do you envision teaching critical thinking? Because like very easily
Mm.
people will be like, oh, that you're trying to teach them, uh, you're trying to uh, not dogmatize them. You're trying to kind of get them to think a specific way when like literally it's the opposite of that. But like, how do you implement that in a way that people aren't like immediately hostile to it, like in a way that you can sell it.
Right. I think it comes down to like a dichotomy between faith-based reasoning and like argumentative or like say science-based reasoning. Like one supported by facts, and that those facts are sort of established based on sources of literature, sources of journalism, sources of research, versus say hearsay or faith or sort of like vibe, basically.
But like even like even in like our society, I'd say like 70 to 90% of adults um like are not sure how to like what sources they're supposed to trust without having to do like extensive research. Expedience is also like one of the things that is the main impetus for choosing one thing over another. Like, does this one more quickly align with the ideas of the world as I already perceive them, or do I have to do way more research to learn whether or not my thing is wrong? You're more likely to pick the thing
Absolutely.
that's already aligning with your predisposition.
Right. I suppose for me, the answer is that at least if I want it to be less expedient and understand that source of this information comes from, at least I have that option with information that I'm ingesting that I believe. Like if I go to the New York Times and I read something about, a claim, I know that at least there's a research article in which that claim is being made, and I can learn more about, how that claim is made and follow the thread of thought all the way, the source of that information.
Mm-hmm.
Versus something that might be a puff piece or opinion article won't have that necessarily, and so I should take that with a grain of salt and understand that that's not necessarily fact. It's something that's just opinion.
What about like kind of like so like between checking sources, also like identifying if this is like a sponsored piece, if this is like this is like why oil is good, but this is like a research paper about why oil is good, but it was funded by like the Koch brothers or
Totally. That's a great point. Yeah, and we don't have great visibility on
like do you think that's something in terms of like crypto like transparency, being able to kind of show where how and when like it was sourced and the
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a really great point. Like Mirror Archive is, I guess, a step in that direction where you have writers being paid by known sources and the contracts all being, publicly displayed as, who's funding this writer, this piece of work. That's a really exciting work, I think.
Yeah, but man, reading is so tiring. Again,
Yeah.
I'm still like it boggles my mind how you're able to stay awake reading like research papers like per day. That's way too much. Like I can barely I can barely get through like the next issue of like a manga. And that has pictures in it, man.
No, I mean there's definitely a technique to reading research that doesn't require really reading it. It's just like you read the abstract, you read the intro, you maybe read like the first sentence or two of like a paragraph here or there, and you read the discussion and conclusion. Like that's not a huge amount. Depending on the article, the intro is really like most of the reading and where all the exciting stuff is.
Yeah,
And the
I remember.
discussion.
I think my first engagement with like actually having to look at other sources in forming an opinion and trying to defend that stance was definitely, so that was in high school for me. Probably in like American history, like where I was like required to cite sources in trying to defend a point. But I think like one of the most like informative lessons that I had was like in one of my English classes, where like the teacher like gave us a couple different articles, and you had to agree or disagree. And like one of the articles was like an Onion article, and most of us like
Nice.
we don't regularly read the Onion or anything, but we didn't
great.
understand that it was like satire. And so like being able to discern what sources are, what is their objective? Is it supposed to be laugh? Is it supposed to be satirical?
That's a great exercise. Yeah.
I think another one was like
brilliant.
we had to read like a modest proposal, and like we didn't get that was satire either. It's like, oh yeah, eat people. You're starving, just eat the babies and you're good.
Well, the reason we should eat people is okay.
Just imagine being like the one kid in the class.
Something.
Yeah, imagine being the one kid in the class that like definitely agreed without thinking it was satire. It's like, yes, we should definitely be eating people. And there are plenty of those people in society who like they read the satire and they buy into like the negative argument without getting that this is like they're making fun of. They're trying to make fun of something.
I just want to believe that they're all performance artists and give them the benefit of the doubt.
Nah, but then you're putting money in like Alex Jones's jar, you know?
It's true. Yeah, I mean, he's definitely understands what he's doing. A lot of these people are very, very clever, but play the game.
Turning the frogs gay.
Yeah.
Well, so you mentioned earlier you've got like issues with some of the like the NFT space. You said you messaged me like you're working on some sort of project, kind of trying to demonstrate the flaw with the digital art space. Can you talk about that?
Yeah,
at all?
I wouldn't say it's going to demonstrate it, but at least it's going to ask the question. And like I'll just preface this by saying like I am in awe of what artists are doing in that space and how that community has flourished and how many works of art are being seen by people that haven't seen that work, and it's spurred like a whole generation of digital artists. So that's fascinating and wonderful. I guess
now shit all over them.
Yeah. No, not the artist. I don't think the problem is going to be with the artist ever, really. Like, all day, every day. Let's have arts flourish, really. But what I'm worried about is something that like akin to what I've been talking about in terms of digital colonialism and what happens when there is digital provenance for every type of media, and when the tools that we use also engage with that digital provenance. What does that mean for creators that aren't necessarily early adopters of the NFT space? Is what it looks like to me is like a land grab. It's like the colonial settlers coming in and saying like, that's my digital space.
I own
that's
this,
my
I can
digital
sell
space.
this.
Yeah, like you don't have deeds of land on any of this digital content, and that's mine. Like that's my happy face, So I guess that's something that I'm worried about is what does it mean to enforce contracts? That looks like the Walt Disneys of the world coming in and saying that's my Mickey Mouse content, you can't use that. And to
Or
sue you.
in like further, I think with the Disney controversy, especially like a lot of the like the princesses are based on folklore characters that were open source and that were that were uh what's it called, public domain. But because
Right.
they made them into like these characters that are now iconic for Disney characters, they own the copyright to these characters and essentially like the story that is the source material.
Exactly. Yeah, it's absurd to me that copyright can dictate what creators can do in that space.
I think what you're
And so
talking about,
I
like
guess that's
something that reminds me of is also like there is like I don't remember what the company or like the creator is called, but they just take like a celebrity's tweet. Like the example I saw was just like it's a tweet from Kanye West, and it's just sold as an NFT. But it's not Kanye. Kanye is not selling it. Somebody's just like they minted this one tweet by him, and they're able to sell that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this even happened in the previous waves of NFTs, like 2017 or 18, whenever it was. And there were people basically claiming content that was theirs and trying to sell that. Uh, and how do you enforce these things? What are the systems for enforcing that?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where things start to break down in my head, and I don't understand, what that future looks like.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, like I know this is also like a thing that like people are getting control of. Like you're able to get like your genome and like essentially have that and curate that yourself, and like you can decide to use this. You can decide to sell some of this data for researchers. You can or you can just like keep it to yourself, and so you essentially control all of your medical history, and like this is also can be used for generating genetically specified medicine, so that it treating you specifically as opposed to like something that had to be tested on a bunch of different things.
Hmm.
And like yeah, just proper ownership of your identity, but like where is that identity like localized, and how are you able to control who's able to like scrape like art that you create, imagery, like what then becomes like legal parody or artwork, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I
Because
guess
like
this, some of the questions.
yeah, what you were mentioning with like all the copyright shit that happened on your YouTube, the YouTube mashup thing, you like the video that I watched, it was like reconstructing Will I or Pharrell I think's song Happy, but
Yeah.
the audio was in no way resemblant of Happy. The
No,
video
even the
is
visuals.
yeah, the visuals, like if you had not seen before, you there's no way you could imagine that was what that is.
Totally. But the robots think it's happy, and so I'm not getting copyright infringement claims on the other videos in which the source material comes from. I'm getting copyright infringement claims from Pharrell Williams content right holders saying like you're infringing on our copyrights, and that's interesting because
Uh-huh.
that's like the perception below which we understand, but robots only operate on that level of perception.
Yeah, if I had to
So
guess, it was
it's
because they were like pulling up like, oh, this imagery like fit into like what technically came from this original piece. But yeah, like
yeah, it's
it's
something like that.
sorry, go on.
It's more it's more like the perception of a computer isn't the perception that we have.
Hmm.
It's very much um, a lower level of perception, if that's the term I can use. Like it's to the robot something that looks abstract and moves and sounds like Pharrell Williams, even though to our eyes is like a mess, sounds and looks like Pharrell Williams. So that's,
Hmm.
they're going to say that's a match. I'm using the same algorithms or like similar algorithms that the robot's using in order to detect if this is a match in order to create the content. But it's a content that's very different and looks totally different. Like there's work
Hmm.
in adversarial images, or Tom White's another research artist that plays with this idea a bit as well. Like he creates very abstract imagery that image algorithms would detect as like a chair or something like that. But you look at it and it's just a bunch of blobs, really. Popular kind of research program is adversarial algorithms, things like this, things that are designed basically to fool algorithms.
But then also, like, I can't remember who had this this court case recently, but she was essentially like claiming right to her like personage for like a photo. But she lost the case because the person who took the photo, they technically have the legal right to that photo. And like, you know, that it's like the rights of like the paparazzi and of you know, media creators to like take photos of things. And so like, do you still own the right to your own image if somebody else like did something like to creatively reconstruct it? And I imagine like, you know, with especially with like creating these mosaics using a bunch of like scraped images and like machine learned like models.
Totally.
Like how what is like a level of obfuscation that is like proper to say that it's something that's new? Or if like if it is already like so close to the source image, like, you know, what is drawing a mustache on the Mona Lisa enough to say that it's like a new painting?
Exactly. Yeah. There's no clear answer. It's something that, like, even copyright by its very nature isn't something that's well defined. It's something that has to be interpreted in a court of law, and you have to make use of things like fair use arguments in order to say that I'm not infringing on somebody's copyright. Like, there's no, you can't just put on a video like I'm using this for fair use. Like, you have to be sued first and then go to a court and like claim like this is fair use. And the whole system is set up to protect content right holders, not creators. And that's why things like Aaron Swartz and Creative Commons was created to try and empower creators and get rid of this idea of copyright. Whereas, you know, like, to bring it back to the NFT space, that's what I kind of am worried about, is that it's digital rights management and it's not empowering creators. I don't know if it is, at least just yet.
Well, I wouldn't even say it's still like in the favor necessarily of like the rights, the copyright rights holder, as opposed to like, you know, if they need to have like a large enough company to like influence whether or not they're going to try to enforce it, or, you know, like, are they going to go for the slap on the wrist, or are they going to call in the lawyers to throw as many books at you as they can?
Exactly. Yeah.
Man, copyright's never fun. Is copyright ever fun?
No.
Can you think of an example of copyright ever being fun?
Yes. There was a famous work, I don't know if it's so famous, this Canadian musician, John Oswald, I think he was Canadian, he did Plunderphonics, which is an album released of Michael Jackson. And it's very fun. I think you should check it out.
Plunderphonics?
He was sued by, I think Sony held the right to Michael Jackson at that time. Or maybe the Michael Jackson estate or somebody, I don't know. It's just fun because it's so horribly comical, I think. The
Plunderphonics or audio piracy as a compositional prerogative.
Exactly. That's the one.
Yeah. This sounds fun. This sounds like a fun way of like fucking with copyright.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to check this out. Are there any artists that you like specifically follow, either in the generative art space or just like, you know, musicians or writers?
Yes, absolutely. I think two of my favorite artists are based in LA. Lauren McCarthy, who works with a lot of
Liam.
I'm sorry, Lauren McCarthy.
Lauren McCarthy.
Who teaches at UCLA in the Design Media Arts program. She's an artist. She's well known for her work for P5JS. She also works on a lot of questions surrounding AI and surveillance and social kinds of AI. I think that's a really bad summary of her work, but yeah, she's got a lot of fascinating work. Always kind of challenging the perception of what AI's role in society is. She has this one work which is like, oh my god, there's so many interesting ones. Let's see, there's one that's just called Lauren, and it's just her like as a panopticon installed in somebody's house, like an Alexa system, and she just invites people to allow her to do this, where she will be the smart home of their home and install these cameras into their home and control various things, and kind of like, you know, just that experience and questions that are asked as a result of that experience.
Oh yeah, I'm looking at it. So laurenmccarthy.com. She's got like a website where she's got all of her projects and stuff.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. She's yeah, she's engaging with really kind of important questions, which always makes you think, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And another one of my favorite artists, which happens to be her partner, which is Kyle McDonald, and he's a computational artist. He working with code, I think is how he describes himself. And
okay, sorry, say that again.
Kyle McDonald. And he also works with a lot of questions surrounding AI and surveillance, but he's also just like infinitely interested in anything and everything, and has this ability to follow his thread of thought down to the very like minute detail of how to implement that thing. And he's most recently worked on like Humpback Whale Song. He did something for the Olympics for the fencing visualization and understanding with Rhizomatics, a Tokyo-based research lab. He's worked on like computer vision quite a lot. His early work was sort of more involved in surveillance and computer vision. Yeah, check his work out.
Vibe Check 2020 with Lauren McCarthy.
Oh, this is a new work. With
it's from 2020.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that one, but yeah, they do some work together as well.
Ice Spy.
Yeah, they're fascinating people. There are a lot of interesting artists. I think Julian Oliver's work is also really engaging. Also works in like technology systems and sort of asking questions of surveillance. I think he even has some work in crypto space. Yeah, I don't want to like give a list. I don't, for fear of leaving out so many interesting artists, but
no, I mean, I'm definitely trying to make a better habit of actually like checking out people that like my guests recommend. This book also that you recommended of like the Lives of a Cell.
So yeah,
can't guarantee I'm going to get all the way through it, but I'm definitely checking it out a bit.
Yeah, I would love to hear what you think. For me, it was it's still with me, and I've read it like a year ago. It still invades my thought process, which is a sign of a good book, I think.
Cool. All right, so we're about arriving at time. Where can people find you? What can they look forward to coming out from you?
You can follow me on Twitter or Instagram at pkmital. I don't release a lot of my work. It kind of just sits on my hard drive or on my phone. But I am trying to set myself some goals to release certain work by the year's end, and so hopefully there will be more news about that.
And if people like want to work with you, I guess artistically, they can look up the Garden in the Machine, the Garden in the machine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you probably won't find any information about that anywhere. So that's just kind of the name of my company, which you know.
So reach out to you personally.
Yeah, or my website is pkmittal.com, and you can reach out to me there as well.
Yeah, you can try to read through his extensive list of all the things that he's worked on, done, published. It's a doozy. You can try to read his entire thesis, his entire PhD thesis.
Yeah, I wouldn't wish that upon my worst enemies. So don't worry about reading that.
Parag, thank you for being my guest. It was a very interesting conversation.
Yeah, very engaging. Thanks for having me on. Yeah,
man. I'll lead us out. This has been our Mochi Podcast, episode 15 with Parag Mital. I hope you know, if you listen to it, you enjoyed it.
Thanks, Robin.